Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn, where we dive into the minds and melodies that shape our world. And today we're thrilled to welcome Randy Edelman, who is a musical icon with unforgettable scores for The Last of the Mohicans, Ghostbusters 2, and MacGyver, all of which have left an indelible mark on cinema and television. From penning pop hits covered by Barry Manilow and the Carpenters to his latest album, Waltzing on a High Wire, Randy's music weaves stories that resonate globally. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Andrew Eborn Show. How are you doing, Randy?
Good. Nice to be here.
It's always a pleasure. Now, you started in Broadway pit orchestras before becoming a global composer for film, TV, and pop hits. What sparked your love for music as a kid in Teaneck, New Jersey, and how did those
Right.
how did those early days shape your path to such a
Just, you
diverse
know
career?
what? It was just I guess a natural thing. No one in my family was musical or seriously, but we had a piano in the living room. And so I started picking out melodies when I was very little, and I guess I showed an interest in it. And that's where it started, right very, very young. I didn't have any clue as to that I would be doing, or let alone anything like I got into, but I was definitely interested. And when I was growing up, Andrew, it music wasn't hip, The only thing that was cool when you were a kid growing up in New Jersey was one thing: sports,
Oh, is
you
that
know,
right? Okay.
not music. That started a little later, Beatles and all that stuff. So anyway, I did it on my own, but kind of quietly. And I was just like everybody else out playing ball. And so I did it, my whole young life.
And do you remember your first music experience? You remember hearing your first record or seeing your first concert?
Oh, well, that was much later. It got very complicated when I got out of school. I was doing different things. I really only played in on Broadway for a very short time before I started doing my own, writing my own music and doing that. So because I was pretty young at the time, and that's how it started. But my first concert, funnily enough, was with a group who were so huge at the time, a brother and sister called Karen and Richard Carpenter,
Ah,
and they I didn't realize at the time, when you do an album as your first album, you want it to be selling off the shelves, right? So no one ever heard this little album I did. However, just a sort of quirk of fate, Richard, the brother in the group who was the musician, heard my album, and the way I played the piano clicked with him, and they not only recorded some songs, but they said, why don't you go on tour with us and be our opening act? Now you got to understand, I had never sung in front of anybody. I had only done this one album. That's it. So I went out, and first concert was 15,000 people. Not a concert hall. Field houses, basketball arenas. That's so. Anyway, that was the first time I ever sung in front of anybody, which is kind of odd.
right. And what did you sing? Do you remember what you sang?
I only sang what I know. The only thing I knew were the 10 songs on my album, which
Right.
was an album written because in college, right before then, my girlfriend dumped me.
Oh no.
Yes. Oh, now of course I laugh. It wasn't funny. Deadly serious. So I had 10 sad songs. That's all I knew. You know.
So
That's
you've
all.
got to be. They always say that artists have to suffer for their art.
Oh,
Did you
oh no, no,
find
you know
that?
what? Okay. Maybe, I absolutely agree totally. It's not just a cliche, and then to pull something out of you. If it wasn't for that, maybe I wouldn't have started writing songs because I'd never written songs or written lyrics. That was the other thing, So who knows? That's what happened.
Right. Now you said that your music captures the heartbeat of the world. Glorious phrase.
No,
Can you?
I say that. You just said I would never be so bold as to say that, Andrew.
Well, I'll say it for you. It's got to be good. But can you unpack that idea and share how you infuse your emotional pulse into songs like Uptown, Uptempo, Woman, or your film scores?
Well, okay. Two things. First of all, I never think about oh, I'm making a statement. First of all, yeah, you mentioned, I'm glad you just said what you did. The songs, which I did earlier, are a completely different craft than film scoring.
Yeah.
That I didn't get into later, which was much more pressured and challenging. But they're two totally different things. Um, Writing a song, you can write in 5 minutes a great song. That's just the way that is. You can also spend a year and write a terrible song. But uh, film scoring is totally different. That's backbreaking 24/7, under pressure work. So to answer your question, I only wrote and only have written, and because I stopped for 25 years or something when I was scoring all those movies, I only write from personal experience. I sit down and I'll write a song. It has to come from, it doesn't necessarily have to be my personal experience, but some kind of experience. I could be reading a newspaper and I see a story about something and I write a song. But that's the way I write songs. I don't just come up with, oh, I want to write a hit song. It's never been like that. So that's the way I write songs. The film scoring thing, that's a whole different issue,
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, you look at both those sides and you say it's a very different craft. But things like your songs that are like Weekend in New England and they became timeless, didn't they, through artists like Barry Manilow and the Carpenters, who you mentioned.
Yeah.
What's the magic? Talk to me about the magic of hearing your compositions come to life through their voices, and how did those collaboration shape your songwriting?
Okay. Now, here's the thing about me, not other people. I've never written a song for anybody, any of those people. I never wrote that song. I never wrote Barry Manilow a song or Olivia Newton-John or the Carpenters. I wrote the song and I recorded it on an album that nobody heard, most likely, except, thank God, somebody heard it and they recorded it. When I hear their record, I must say, first of all, it was a great thing for a young kid to have, this thing happen as a songwriter, which I had never planned on. So that's all great. And I always appreciated it. I didn't, critique it, and most of the time, just about all the time, those people all tried to be true or faithful to the recording, of which there was only one. It was only my recording that they had heard. So it always felt great. And one thing you mentioned, a song that I did early on called Uptown Uptempo Woman.
Yes.
Now that you could give me $1 billion for that. That is a complete non-commercial song. It's a story song with this funny classical piano playing. So for that, get a listen, which it did, by the way, and I'm going to be serious now, because a lot of people, especially in England, they think that song is a standard. Nobody knows that song at all. Only in England. And you'd say, how is that possible? We speak the same language. Well, that's the way that happened. But something unique and original like that to me is like fantastic. Yeah. So that always was, that particular song that you mentioned was always a cool thing because it was unique to me. Now that's a song that you see those other people would have never, ever recorded.
Right. And it is extraordinary. I mean, we talked about the difference between obviously those songs and the film and TV scores. I mean, your last, let's take another, we've got such a rich catalogue, but your last of the Mohicans score with its haunting beauty, it earned a Golden Globe nomination. It still moves audiences. How did you craft that iconic sound, and what's the secret to film score that lingers in our hearts?
Well, film scoring, you obviously have to be know all different facets of composing, orchestrating, arranging, but mainly also you have to be able to look at an image, which is the film that the director shot, in a very short amount of time. I could spend years on every film score. Sometimes you have weeks. So it's got to be a combination of looking at something, coming up with a mood that you feel will support and raise the emotional level of the movie, Or you know what? If it doesn't do that, don't put any music there with a scene. Only put music. That's the other important thing. Only put music where the music can enhance the film. And sometimes you don't want any music, but you have to be able to look at it. And like I said, for me, the collaboration, I always because a lot of times you work on films and the director is always coming over your place to hear stuff. And you want to say, listen, do me a favor. You hired me. If you don't want me to do it, go get someone else. Leave me alone with what you did, because the collaboration on a film thing is not a director or producer coming in and saying, I want this, I want that. It's the composer. Look what they have killed themselves in. Many times people work on these things 20 years. They're not shooting it for 20 years, but in order to put these things together, half the time the film is greenlighted, a big one, and it gets thrown. They never end up doing it. So finally, after this long process of whatever kind of film it is, then they bring it to the composer, who's the last person in, and you look at it and you got to come up with something. So what you don't want is them knocking at your door wanting to hear something. You want to think and come up with something, and that takes time. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have any time.
Yeah.
So that's the balance that.
It is a difficult balance, and creatively, and people work in different ways.
Yeah, and lots of, it doesn't matter. Lots of pressure.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you like pressure? Do you thrive under pressure? Some people do.
Well, you can't you can't write film scores, at least at a certain level. If you can't do that, because that's part of the game. I didn't think I did, but it turns out that I do. I do. And the things that I've done very fast, like Mohicans, which was a mess.
Yes.
That was a mess, that movie. You have no idea. And I got a lot of flack, because if you'll see, there's 2 names on that score. And people think, and there was another score I did for a completely opposite movie that also was a huge hit, called Twins, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the great composer George Delarue. But the fact of the matter is that I never even met George Delarue, nor Trevor Jones, who's English. There was something that happened, none of my business. I was just brought in, and you don't have time to think about it. And I did my part, and it worked in both of those instances. People would say, Jesus, that sounds like it's screwed up. In both of those cases, and especially Mohicans, it worked beautifully. And that's just the way it turned out. But that was watching this, wonderful actor, Daniel Day-Lewis, who you know.
Yes.
And Daniel Day-Lewis never got the credit he deserved. I don't know if you've ever met him or really seen him. For the guy I sat next to at the premiere of that picture, who I didn't even know in the first place who it was, that meek, quiet, thin guy in the corner where we were having something to eat, how could he be Hawkeye in that movie, the way he looked and he moved? That is just as much being a great actor. He did. And so he was great in that. So, I was watching that movie and all the different nuances that the director, Michael Mann, who's a major talent, difficult, but they're all difficult. And that one, each one of those movies is a story. And on my end, most of the time, a horror story. You know what I mean? Because it's difficult. You're the last one in, the composer. And you'd say, well, why didn't they bring the composer in a million? No, it doesn't work like that. There's too much going on. And when they finally get the movie settled and edited, and they have screenings, then they preview it with temp music and all that stuff. Then you come in. So it's a difficult situation.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, a lot of it's down to personalities, and sometimes those personalities clash, and you get brought in to pick up the pieces, if you like.
Yeah.
How do you seem to do it brilliantly? How do you navigate those sort of personalities so well?
Well, I got to tell you, to be honest with you, you know what, to make to be creative and to make any kind of art, I don't care if it's writing a novel or a painting, you have to get into it on a certain emotional level, and you have to finally sit down and do it and believe in it. You can't be questioning everything. So it may sound like I'm not answering your question at all, because what I found is at some point when I say I have to put my foot down, I have to do what I do. And in most cases, it works out. In other cases, you can't please everybody, you know. But and each of the directors in television, which I hadn't done, I don't do that much of, but it was more feature films. The producers and the network are involved. In feature films, it's basically a director and the composer. There's one person, and they are totally, each one different personalities. The best guy who I loved, and I was lucky because if someone said, "Who's your favorite director?" at the time I worked with him, it was another Englishman, Alan Parker.
Ah,
Alan
yes.
was, you know, on look at the film Midnight Express, Fame, Mississippi Burning. I mean, unbelievable. So when I got to do a film, he wrote about the Japanese internment camps in California in the 40s. Not exactly a commercial subject. It was a great thrill, but it turned out that a guy who made those serious movies turned out to be a very funny, like North London beer drinking guy. Whereas another director like Ivan Reitman, that I did Kindergarten Cop and Ghostbusters 2 and Twins and all those things, comedies, wasn't a funny personality. He had a very serious demeanor. So they're all different, you know. And that kind of reflects when I remember these films. People say, "Well, oh, you know, which one is your favorite?" I don't remember them as far as which ones were hits, of which I did many. I remember the relationship that I had creatively with that director. That's what I kind of carry with me about any film that you would mention to me.
Yeah,
So,
and it's an industry full of relationships. I mean, I have lots of very famous people on the show, and actually those who are so comfortable in themselves. You talk about Daniel Day-Lewis. Those who are very comfortable in themselves don't have the arrogance that those who are climbing up in the industry have. You must have found that all the time, haven't you?
yeah. You can't. You have to temper, but like I said, not you can't be arrogant. But there comes a certain time, especially with films, where you're on a deadline, uh, and each situation is different. But where you've got to just do it. You know, if you keep listening to people and compromising, what you come up with is something that's 50% and bland, as opposed to something you went for. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to be wrong,
Yeah.
because that's just the nature of it. But luckily, most of the time, that when I'm involved, it turns out pretty well.
Good. Well, and actually, you've scored everything from the high energy MacGyver to the quirky charm of My Cousin Vinny, and obviously the epic
Well,
Dragonheart.
yeah, and yeah, they're older. MacGyver, by the way, was obviously a series
Yes.
that I did the theme of years ago. And these things, Andrew, it's just uncanny with me. MacGyver was a series that, in the days of when the networks ruled
Yes.
television, and they hated it. They thought it was a silly, but they liked the guy, and so they picked it up. No one ever thought they cut a 2 hour TV movie that was the pilot to an hour. I'm not talking about shaving minutes.
Yeah.
That means it was terrible. However, they liked the guy, and that thing is still on, you know, on millions of years. It lasted forever. I only was involved with the beginnings and wrote the theme, but that's a TV thing. Uh, but again, it was something that there was no potential. Like when I was doing it, I knew what it was, but no one seemed to know what it was. And then you mentioned something like My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin Vinny was a little nothing picture, um, that nobody cared about. And I was the fourth guy down. The first three people they wanted didn't do it. But that's okay. And I just had at the time, and I didn't want to do another comedy because I was trying to get into these other things like Gettysburg and Mohicans and these things. But I did it, and I thought it was great. And it opened and it did okay, but it wasn't like a big hit. And now look at what that is. That's the most iconic film there is. And the girl in it, and no one ever gets an Academy Award in a comedy. The girl in it, Marissa Tomei, won the Oscar for that great part that she did. But I have many examples of that, like that, of things that were not highly thought of as far as being hits. And The Mask is another one with Jim Carrey, another classic.
Yeah, I absolutely brilliant. And as I say, you have such a wildly different stories. I mean, how do you shift gears to match those wildly different stories, and which projects stretched you the most creatively?
Okay, even though dramas, like Gettysburg or Dragonheart or Mohicans, people see those and they listen to the music and it's very big and moving. And they go, "Oh, that's great." But those are much easier. The hardest things are comedies, because comedy.
Oh, you're frozen just a
To
little
write
bit.
it.
Oh, we lost you for a minute there. The hamster wheels are turning at a wonderful rate, but you're back, which is good.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, comedies are very difficult, and I did so many of them, but they're harder to write. The ones that are kind of more, bigger and obvious musically, period things, dramas, action pictures, those things kind of dictate the mood, at least, of what you're going to write and where you say, "Oh, that needs something." And it's going to be dark, or it's going to be threatening, or it's got to be, comedies are much different. And to be honest with you, a good comedy with somebody wonderfully talented, like Joe Pesci in My Cousin Vinny, or Jim Carrey in The Mask, or Sandra Bullock in While You're Sleeping, any of these things, if they're good, which they are, or Eddie Murphy in Distinguished Gentleman, you don't need music. They're just funny. And so never put music with them unless it's a scene that needs music kind of behind it, whatever that may be, but not just to be funny. So to answer your question succinctly, it's a comedy is much more challenging than dramas, although you get noticed for the big dramatic or romantic scores.
Yeah, no. So, take us behind the scenes. You talk about maybe there's a moment, a burst of inspiration, or a hurdle you overcame, like films like you mentioned, Kindergarten Cop. We got The Mask, or your recent The Possession of Anne. Talk to me about one of those bursts of inspiration or hurdles that stands out in your memory.
Well, each, like every one of those that you just mentioned, are completely different animals. But
Absolutely.
the one that you mentioned, that was a huge hit, and people may say, "Oh, that was a comedy with Arnold Schwarzenegger," was Kindergarten Cop. The hurdle in that was it was about a drug bust, and unless you treated this guy who went undercover as a kindergarten teacher, that drug bust and those characters in a serious, threatening way, the whole thing would fall apart. So I had to do it was almost like different movies. I had to take that and the action of that and the harrowing, threatening law and order part of that, and then juxtapose that with these beautiful young kids who are in this kindergarten in a school in Oregon. And suddenly the guy comes in the beginning of the school year to be their teacher. And it's this huge guy. And you can imagine these kids looking. And I had to come up with something that was innocent, but something that was kind of had a wonderment that these kids are suddenly confronted with this guy who's their kindergarten. And then there were other aspects, but the whole score demanded very different. Then there was a love story, kinds of genres of music that obviously had to be mended and threaded together so that by the end of that film is with it and
Right.
hopefully case. But you know,
No, glorious. Now, talk about your tour then. You're coming to the UK. Hurrah. The 80 Minutes Around the World tour. It hits the UK this October, the 2025. October the 16th, I think, is the Bowden Rooms in Altrincham.
yeah. Listen, it's I don't do this that often, and of course, I love coming there. And it's just a couple of spots, and I love doing. Though I love London, these are going to be a couple of spots. One's in Kent, in an old
Yeah,
brewery called the
Britain. It was Britain's oldest brewery, isn't it? The Faversham
yes,
Old Brewery Store.
and the thing that's interesting to me because I'm a history buff and it's
Yeah,
near Churchill's place, Chartwell or whatever that is they made the Spitfires there,
right.
down there. That interested me, and then there's another one in Surrey, and then there's another one outside Manchester, the one you mentioned.
Yeah.
But these are these like really nice little theaters, and I like doing that. And I stopped going to England for a long time, at least to do this, except once in a while I would do film scores there. But I stopped performing because I wasn't doing that. So a while back, a couple of years ago, I got back into songs because I never really mixed the movies and the songs. I never wrote a song for one of my film scores. People say, "How come you don't?" That's not my gig on a film score. So anyway, I love going back there. So I'm going to do a couple of these places.
I know,
And
fantastic. And
right.
and it's glorious. We're really looking forward to it. It's going to be a fantastic tour. Having a look at those sort of days, do check the website for those sort of details. Looking at some of your glorious career, looking back from scoring NASA's shuttle launch to the Olympics and over 100 films, your music's obviously touched countless lives. What's the proudest moment of your career?
Uh, um, Yipes. Fortunately, I've had lots of wonderful moments. I mean, whether it's performing when the hall is full of people who are listening, that always turns me on.
Right.
Uh, Conducting the orchestra for any of these film scores right here in town or in London at Abbey Road is great. Getting a doctorate degree at the university where I graduated, and the other person that day getting a doctorate degree with lots of people there was Coretta Scott King.
Right.
That was a great moment. I mean, I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but yeah. So there's lots of really nice moments as far as being proud. I'm just happy sitting in my room here every day, coming in here, still sitting behind my piano because I basically never really considered myself a film composer or a singer songwriter. I basically always liked the kind of moniker of I'm a musician, and that's what I love to do since day one. And here I am, pulling the wool over everybody's eyes for all these years, still sitting.
They're always advice. And if Randy, if you were to write a letter to the young Randy Edelman at the beginning of your career, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, I mean, it's like again, it sounds like a cliche, but just believe in what you're doing and do not listen to opinions because that'll get you in that'll lead you the wrong way. If you're serious about what you do and you'll put the work in and the practice, um, believe in yourself. That's really it. As far as specifics, well, first of all, like I said, I never knew up until I was a teenager. I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know about writing songs. I had no concept about film scoring, except when I saw like Maurice Jarre score for Lawrence of Arabia or Dr. Zhivago. I said, "Ooh, that's moving stuff." but I wasn't a buff, because people weren't at that time of film scores. But I would just say, and work hard. And the other thing is, again, it sounds old fashioned, but in this business, as in any business, that you're not getting necessarily, you're not getting a paycheck every week, or you don't have a net to fall into. You're going to get knocked down most of the time, and you got to get back up.
Yeah.
People that don't get back up will, and they may be the most talented people in whatever their artistic craft is. So that's what I would say. It sounds like a very big
I
generalization,
know, but it's a great generalization, and it's good advice because people always talk about success, but very rarely about the failure that leads to that success. I mean, you've got with Waltzing on a High Wire, that's out now. You've got projects like the musical Shortcut and the new album Can't Be Killed by Any Conventional Means. All of those things keep you really,
yeah,
really active and
yeah,
reinventing yourself.
that's my experience. My experience is not making an album and the album comes out and suddenly, boom, that's not my experience in any area. If people may think it is, because they look back now, at this time and they go, whoa, I mean, I've been accused of being the son of that guy, Randy Edelman, that wrote those songs, you know what I mean? All the time. I mean, all the times in Australia. I mean, but no, I've just been around and I worked at it because I loved what I was doing. I wasn't like going up a hill, but there were lots of challenges along the way. And so that's my advice to anybody. Stick
Brilliant
with it.
stuff. Fine. Finally, then, looking back in 100 years' time, how would you like to be remembered?
Just as someone who added a bit of creativity while I was on the planet. Quite seriously, that's about it. Hopefully, and that's what's great about us,
That wonderful stuff.
especially these. They're gonna
Well, you
somebody.
certainly
Yeah.
go for it.
I
What were you going
said
to
this
say?
the other day, and they did. I said this to someone the other day when they were asking me about something. They thought it was so odd. I said, you know what? My big romantic thought is that but it has to do with what you said. Is that someday, okay, a while from now, somebody in some foreign place is going to be looking at streaming at or whatever is the technical thing at the, and they're going to be watching a film, and there's going to be a moment in that film. They won't know who wrote the music necessarily. They're watching the film, and something in that scene, in that music, really moves them. They don't speak English necessarily. They, and that to me, when that person perks up and is moved by, it doesn't matter if it's in a comedy or a drama or a period piece, and they recognize that, to me, that is a satisfying thing.
Oh,
That you understand what I'm saying? It
yeah. Oh,
sounds
absolutely. And it's the
that to me, that, like I said, whenever, wherever, that moment, and they realize, wow, that music really, either they're moved or they're laughing hysterically. That to me is something that kind of made my time here not to be worthwhile.
yeah,
That's sort
brilliant.
of it.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute delight having you on the Andrew Eborn Show, Randy. I very much look forward to having you back as a guest. But for now, thank you very much for joining me.
Great. Maybe I'll see you when I'm there.
I'm looking forward to it. Take care.
Take care. Thanks, Andrew.